In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in black and white emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. Let's start with this Black History reflection of roots of the Peach State, Georgia, Black Power, and the long road to the governor's mansion. Georgia is not simply a battleground state. It is sacred ground. It is the birthplace of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the spiritual homeland of John Lewis, the political proving ground where Stacey Abrams built a voter registration movement that turned an entire state purple, and yet the governor's mansion has remained locked to Democratic hands since 1998 and locked to Black hands forever. Let us go back. In 1973, Maynard Jackson became the first Black mayor of the major southern city when Atlanta elected him, a seismic moment that cracked open what many believed was impenetrable. Andrew Young followed, and Atlanta grew into the Black Mecca of America, a city where Black political power was not just tolerated, it was cultivated, organized, and celebrated. But the state of Georgia, that was a different matter entirely. While Black Atlanteans built institutions, ran corporations, and elected their own, the gubernatorial seat remained out of reach. Then came Stacey Abrams. In 2018 and again in 2022, Abrams made history simply by being the nominee, but history was not yet ready to make her governor. She lost both times to Republican Brian Kemp. Those races sharpened the movement. They built the infrastructure. They registered hundreds of thousands of new voters, the newcomers. Now comes Keisha Lance Bottoms, a judge's daughter, a former city council member, a two-term Atlanta mayor, a senior advisor to a U.S. president, and now the Democratic nominee for governor of Georgia, positioned to do what Abrams could not, and that's win. The arc of this moral universe is long, but in Georgia in November 2026, it may finally be bending towards that governor's mansion. So let me start the show here with this opening monologue so we can get this show rolling. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon, wherever you are and whenever you're listening. Welcome to America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King, and tonight we're going all the way in on what I believe is the single most important state-level race in the country right now. We're talking about the Georgia governor's race in 2026. Now, I need you to understand what is at stake here, not a dramatic cable news hype kind of way, but in real historical, our people fought and bled for this kind of way. Georgia has not sent a Democrat to the governor's mansion since 1998. That is 28 years. Let that sink in. 28 years. When Roy Barnes lost his re-election bid in 2002, that door closed, and it has been closed ever since. Through to Stacey Abrams' campaigns, through a Biden win in 2020, through the election of Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock to the U.S. Senate, Georgia went purple everywhere except the governor's seat. But this year is different. Because on one side of the ballot, you have Keisha Lance Bottoms, former mayor of Atlanta, former senior advisor to President Biden, the Democratic nominee, who, if she wins in November, will become the first Black woman ever elected to governor anywhere in these 50 states. Ooh, that is something. Not just Georgia, anywhere in American history. On the other side, you've got Rick Jackson, a billionaire, a self-funded billionaire who spent over $100 million of his own money to win the Republican primary. A man who was unknown a year ago is now the Republican standard bearer for Georgia's top office. And the polls, they show a statistical dead heat. Folks, this race is alive. Tonight, I'm going to walk you through what you need to know, the candidates, the platforms, the money, the polling, the fault lines of race and gender and geography, and what this race means for Black America specifically. No guests, no panel, just me, the facts, and the truth. Let's get into it. So first of all, I want you guys to know that I have titled this show is titled The Peach State Power Play. And this is going to be one to not just talk about, but to remember, because November is going to be an interesting time, not just here in Georgia, but I think for the country, because the country is waging a lot on this race. So let's start off first by telling you who is Keisha Lance Bottoms and why does she matter? Keisha Lance Bottoms was not supposed to be the front runner. She entered a crowded Democratic primary a year ago, a field that included a former state senator, a former DeKalb County executive, and even a former Republican lieutenant governor turned Democrat. The political establishment had questions. Some Democrats worried that her record as Atlanta's mayor from 2018 to 2022 would make her too vulnerable in a general election. She governed through a global pandemic. She governed through the George Floyd uprising. She governed through growing pains, criticisms, and public scrutiny. And then she walked away to serve in the Biden White House. So one thing I did not disclose, let me disclose this to you guys. So you know, I'm not partisan, which means I want you guys to know I'm not a Democrat and I am not a Republican. I'm definitely independent, but I want to make sure that in getting this information out to the voters here in the state of Georgia, you know, I want you guys to realize the importance of what's at stake. But none of that stopped her on May 19, 2026. Keisha Lance Bottoms won the Georgia Democratic primary outright with a 56.2% of the vote. No runoff was needed. That is not just a win, that is a mandate. And she defeated Jason Estevez, Michael Thurman, and Jeff Duncan. And she did it by dominating every major voter segment. She led among women, she led among men, she led among Black voters by 32 points over her nearest rival, and she led among white Democrats by 14 points. When the dust settled, she was clear, undisputed choice for Georgia's Democratic Party. So on that platform breakdown, what Bottoms is running on is education. Now, this is very important, and I know most of us, you know, especially the parents that's got kids in school that's going through different education systems, and sometimes you never know what you're going to get, you know, what's happening with the teachers, what's just going on in general when it comes to education. With this administration, there's been an enormous amount of changes when it comes to education. You know, of course, there's the book ban. There's stuff that they're taking out of schools, like you can't talk about DEI. You know, they're stopping Black history. I mean, there's just a number of things that's happening right now. So education is very key. And so for education, Bottoms is pushing to create a pathway to free technical and community college for Georgia families. She wants to eliminate state income tax for teachers, a bold move in a state that has been losing educators to higher paying markets. So literacy is a centerpiece of her education agenda. Healthcare. Bottoms supports expanding Medicaid in Georgia, a policy that Republican governors have blocked for over a decade, leaving hundreds of thousands of Georgians uninsured. She wants to end Georgia's Pathways, the state's controversial work requirement Medicaid program, and she's prioritizing maternal health and reproductive rights. So, just to add a little bit to that as I move on, what I think a lot of us need to understand is with the Affordable Health Care Act, when it was viable, all states had to pay into the exchange, which means Georgia was paying into the exchange. And so when you go into the exchange and you go to healthcare.gov and everybody was getting these low prices for healthcare, that is the reason why. And so, but here in Georgia, by not being a part of that healthcare system, what that did is Georgia would not let as far as the Medicaid part go, in order to help the citizens of Georgia to get those lower rates. So rates have always they've been a little bit higher. They were lower than what they normally would be, but they were still high compared to other states. And the states that paid into the Medicaid expansion system, they are getting health care for their patrons are paying little to nothing for health care. So that's a good thing, I think, what Keisha Lance Bottoms is trying to do. And also she's fighting for prioritizing the maternal health, which is for, what's been historically known for years and years and years, that in childbirth, how Black women are dying due to childbirth, and nothing has been done to try to understand what is happening when this takes place. And she's also she wants to restore the reproductive rights. That is for women to make the choices of their own bodies when it comes to if they decide they need to have an abortion or not. So she wants to reverse that, which I still think is a good thing. She's also talking about public safety. And she's calling for expanded Georgia Bureau of Investigation capacity, university background checks, stronger re-entry pathways for formerly incarcerated Georgians, and targeted violence reduction investments. That's really cool. She's also investing in a part of her platform that she's running on is for small businesses. She wants to create an office of small businesses within the state of Georgia, the state government, and expand small business loans and grant programs. That's here in the state of Georgia, where the state of Georgia will be able to do these instead of actually using the federal loan programs. But there's a whole lot more to that. Also, a direct nod to Georgia's thriving Black business community. So, with that being said, Lance Bottoms' platform, it actually hits all of the key moments, the key spots, shall I say, that we today, here in just in the world and community, just in the general space of people and being, that education, healthcare, public safety, and small businesses, that really sets the tone. The tone that she is setting here is, one, we need to make sure that our kids are literate. And that is that they can actually read on grade level as they advance through elementary school, middle school, and high school into colleges and universities, where they're able to do what they need to do from a literal perspective that would make things a whole lot easier as the world breathes. As far as the healthcare goes, I think this is about time, and this is something that should have been done time and time again, because there's so many of us here in Georgia that have been paying these taxes for all this time since the Affordable Health Care Act has passed, but not being able to benefit from the actual healthcare exchange because Georgia has refused to expand Medicaid to be a part of this. That was something that I thought was really astonishing. But, I'm glad that somebody wants to take that up, and I think that that's a proof positive point that I like about what Keisha Lance Bottoms is trying to do. As far as the public safety goes, when she says she's expanding the Georgia Bureau of Investigation capacity, what she's doing is she's basically she wants to take a lot of the load off of local enforcement and make it more of the large scale that bureau, this large scale bureau, to actually do these investigations where hopefully there are no biases and everything that's there is what it is, and we can get quicker results and we can move forward with a lot of cases that they need to get closed. And as far as the small businesses, I think what she's doing here is she is basically keeping in unison with the growth of small businesses here in the state of Georgia, especially here in the Metro Atlanta area, because there's so many businesses, where people either can't get loans or the loan programs are just not available to them for whatever reasons. But I think if the state of Georgia is actually taking that on, then that's something that actually adds more value to not only building business here in Georgia, but keeping those businesses right here in Georgia. Because believe me, when you start an infrastructure like what has happened here and what has transpired, because the movie industry is now just very, very huge here in Georgia. So, it's not just the work, but it's about the infrastructure of these things. And I think for her wanting to do this as her campaign, I really think that this foundation is more than solid, but I think it's one of those platforms that actually should be driving results. And so let me tell you guys about the fundraising reality. So fundraising watch. Despite her primary dominance, Bottoms entered the general election at a serious financial disadvantage. She raised $3.1 million from May through July. Rick Jackson raised $6.1 million in a shorter period, and at the end of July, Jackson had over $4 million in cash on hands. Bottoms had just over $770,000. The Bottoms campaign will require substantial national Democratic donor support and outside spending to compete on the airways. And we're going to talk more about that too, because that's very major. So with the fundraising metric from May to July, Lance Bottoms raised $3.1 million, Jackson $6.1 million. Cash on hand at the end of July, Lance Bottoms $770,000, Jackson $4 million. And the primary self-funding for Keisha Lance Bottoms, she's not self-funding anything into her campaign, but Rick Jackson has put more than $100+ million of his own personal investment into his campaign. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we get into the show, but that's something that I think we all should be wary of. So now let me just tell you guys, who is Rick Jackson and how did he get here? Rick Jackson is not a politician. He has never held public office. He is a Georgia native who grew up in the foster care system. He has spoken publicly about living with 5 different foster families and attending 13 different schools. Out of that instability, he built Jackson Healthcare into one of the largest healthcare staffing companies in the United States. He is a billionaire, and he decided that 2026 was the year that he would run for governor of Georgia. Now, when Jackson announced in February 2026, most political observers barely blinked. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, near certain Republican nominee, then Rick Jackson started spending. He ultimately poured more than $100 million of his personal fortune into the race, making it the most expensive Republican gubernatorial primary in Georgia history. Now, on June 16th of 2026, Rick Jackson did something remarkable. He toppled a Trump-endorsed candidate in a deep red primary. He beat Burt Jones with 52.6% of the vote. In doing so, he proved that in Georgia politics in 2026, one thing can still overcome the power of a presidential endorsement and an endless stream of cash. The platform breakdown. What Jackson is running on is affordability. Now, when it comes to affordability, Jackson is promising to freeze property taxes across Georgia and cut the state income tax in half with a long-term goal of eliminating it entirely. He is also proposing to use artificial intelligence to eliminate what he calls wasteful government spending. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you this. If you can put money into your campaign, hey, that's fine and dandy. But what most of us need to understand about this promise to freezing the property taxes across Georgia, I want you guys to just do some research on that and understand how that works economically, because what happens is that by freezing that means that the citizens, and especially how they decide if he wins, if he structures the government, what that means is that structure is most likely primarily going to come down to the folk that are middle class and lower to be paying these taxes anyway. You're not paying them on your property, but you'll be paying them in a different way, plus some. So I want you guys to just go and do your research on that and find out about that, because I don't think that that's a good thing to do. He's running on education as well. And Jackson is proposing for free tuition, room and board at Georgia's public colleges and technical schools, a policy that sounds similar to Bottom's education proposal, but differs sharply in its conservative ideology framing. So what that means is that what he's actually doing is that's only for those who qualify. This is a qualifying system. Now, I'm not, I'll just say, I think you guys probably want to, if you go into any of his rallies or in his functions, and education is something that you really strongly think about, and it's something that if you're looking at him as a candidate, go to one of his functions, raise your hand and ask a question and find out a little bit more in depth as to what does he mean by this education policy that he wants to run on. Because this is almost like something from some time ago that was like, well, it's called a bait and switch. But, you guys should actually get the opportunity to ask Rick Jackson more about this. He's also running on children and family. Jackson's campaign reflects his personal history in the foster care system. He has made child welfare a signature issue. He is also pushing that Georgia parents' Bill of Rights and has taken anti-transgender policy positions, including opposing transgender girls in girls' sports and restrooms. Wow. Again, this is his policy. This is what he's running on. And I hope that this is something that if this interests any of you guys, I want you to make sure that you go and you check this out, because, that policy in itself, to group it as children and family, that's a signal, for things to come, especially if he becomes governor. Now, before I move further into this, let me just tell you the backstory that nobody expected first, because I'm going to show you guys some numbers, as of lately, as to what we put together for this data. Jackson had to fight his own party's establishment to get here. He was attacked by hardcore conservatives for having previously donated to former Congresswoman Liz Cheney. He later donated $1 million to a major pro-Trump super PAC in what was widely seen as a political course correction. He won the endorsement of U.S. Senators Ted Cruz and Rick Scott. He courted Attorney General Chris Carr's support after Carr was eliminated in the primary. And in the end, the money and the strategy worked. So, what I want to tell you guys, I want to show you guys these numbers here. So, what you're seeing right here is on the head-to-head headline poll, you see Keisha Lance Bottoms is up by 46.4% to Jackson's 44.9%. Now, this 1.5 percentage points leads that she has, this actually puts her right within the margin of error, which makes this, as they say, a dead heat. Now, the numbers have been fluctuating. They've been going up and down, but this is where we stand right now at this point. And so I just want you guys to make sure that you know what those numbers look like. And also, let me just tell you guys about this. This is going to be, this is poll by poll. And so as you see this in poll by poll, you see that in all of these polls, Lance Bottoms is leading in each and every one of these. And so I do want to be cautioned. I want you guys to be cautioned about one thing. And that is, remember, these pollsters have not been right over the last 3 to 4 elections. And that is because the way they're doing the polling is definitely not one that's really representative. So when I say that to say that it's very possible that Keisha Lance Bottoms is up. But what I want you to understand is, you know, with being within the margin of error, it still means that even though it's deadlocked, that there's still that possibility that she can still hold on and win this race. So Jackson's primary fast facts. He announced his candidacy in February 2026. Personal funds invested was $100+ million. He defeated Trump-endorsed Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones on June 16, 2026. And the final primary results, he got 52.6% of the vote, the most expensive Republican gubernatorial primary in Georgia history. And the key endorsements was Senators Ted Cruz and Rick Scott. So, with that being said, what we need to be thinking about here in Georgia is, what do I stand for? What do I like? What do I want to see in my candidate? And do I believe in ethics? And so, in other words, you know, all of these things are good from both candidates. All of these things are good, you know, especially if you can see things the way, you know, if it's from your perspective as to what you like to see, what's good and what's not good. I still say, as I said earlier, you guys need to make sure that you're actually going to check out this information as I'm giving it to you, because I'm telling you, you know, there's some things that I think you guys want to make sure that in learning what each platform is about, the platform tells us everything about who these individuals will become as governors. And so, you know, there's no campaign, either side, that's Republican or Democrat, that they don't have surrogates out there campaigning for them. So because they're out there campaigning for them, I'll just say to each and every last one of you, please don't let these people convince you or have you to not think about your own morals and values and vote for the candidate that they want you to vote for. Because these surrogates, believe it or not, they come from all over the place. They have many, they look like many folk, and they do an enormous amount of things that, you know, once you think about it, especially if you find out that the candidate that you decide to vote for that wins, you know, we have a situation like we have right now here in the U.S. government. And so you don't want to have any of those kind of regrets after voting. But I do say I think each and every individual, as you're watching this, please go and do some research on the platforms of each of these candidates and make your own informed decision. So the numbers don't lie, okay? And when I tell you the numbers don't lie, the numbers don't lie. Here's what the polling picture looks like as of August of 2026, with roughly 83 days until November 3rd general election. I put those up for you on the screen, but I think I have another one that I want to put up as well. And what I want you guys to know is the most recent survey conducted by Quantus Insights from July 29th through August 1st surveyed 815 likely Georgia voters and found bottoms ahead at the 46.4% to 44.9%, which I was telling you about, which is the 1.5% point lead that she has. Now, at one point, that margin was she was up like I think maybe 3, maybe 4 points. And so the thing is what's really playing into this, which is something I think you guys need to understand, is with Rick Jackson, not wanting to debate now. He wants to debate in October. So what he's doing is he has spent $195 million, which means he bought up the airways. So all of us here in Georgia are going to see Rick Jackson on TV like he's a rock star every 2 commercials, every 3 commercials. He's bought up an enormous amount of ad space and buys that basically dominates the airways. Now, again, I don't. There's not a problem, I guess, with funding your campaign or you infusing your campaign with that kind of money. But by infusing your campaign with that kind of money, what does that really, really mean when it comes to the citizens of the state of Georgia? Because as people see it now, it looks like a comparable thing to the American government. And that is, what you see the top 1%, and then there's everybody else. Now, I'm not sure what the situation is with Jackson, but it doesn't look too favorable for me to actually do that. And when I read what his platform is. So, I mean, again, it's one of those things that, you guys have to actually take the opportunity to read, and you get to find out what it is exactly that you stand for. And that's what you need to stick to. Matters not who it is. You just need to stick to what you stick to, and you make that work. But just make sure you're informed and don't let anyone convince you one way or the other. In some other polls that was taken, in the AARP survey, Lance Bottoms was up 48 to 46. In State Navigate, she's up 51 to 44. In the Fox News poll, actually it just shows Keisha Lance Bottoms at 52%, but she's leading. And the Wick Outlier, Jackson is up in that poll 43.2% to 42.7%, which is a 0.5 percentage point. So the fault lines are this. And so now we're about to break this down in a demographic perspective. For women, Lance Bottoms is up 52 to 38.5, which she's up. That means she's up by 13.6 points. With men, Jackson is up 52.1% to 40%, and Jackson has a plus 12.1 percentage point lead when it comes to men. When it comes to black voters, Lance Bottoms is dominant with 81%. With white voters, Jackson is dominant with 62%. Now, when we go into the age brackets, now this is something that I think a lot of us need to be paying close attention to, because the younger generation has a lot to say about this. If you're in the ages of 18 to 29, Lance Bottoms is up 51-30, which is a 21-point lead. In the ages of 30 to 44, she's up 52-30, which is a 22-point lead. And with the ages of 45 to 64, Jackson is up 47-37, which is 10 points. But with the ages 65 plus, Jackson is up 51-37, which is 14 points. Now, when it comes to the urban voters, the people that are here in the city, Lance Bottoms is up 60-27%, which is a 33-point lead. Rural voters, Jackson is up 59-29, which is a 30-point lead. And in suburban voters, Jackson is up 49-39, which is 10 points. Now, the X factor to all of this are the independent voters. That's people like myself. And see, this is where I think the race will primarily be determined, is on the independents and how will they turn. Because both candidates have locked down their party bases. Bottoms holds a 94.8% of Democrats. Jackson holds 88.3% of Republicans. Among independents who have made a choice, Bottoms lead 37-24, but a full 33.7% of independent voters remain undecided. So this block, concentrated in Atlanta's suburbs, will likely decide the outcome of the entire race. Now, that's one for the ages, but that's also one that we really have to make sure that we're paying attention to. Now, this is then the geography of the race, as I was telling you guys. As you see here, Lance Bottoms is up 33%, 33 points with the urban voters. Jackson is up 30 points with the rural voters. And with the suburban vote, Jackson is up 10 points. Now, again, this is just going back to showing you guys these numbers, you know, as I wanted to make sure I get these pointed out to you. Now, when it comes to the party-based loyalty, as I went over already, you see Keisha has 94.8% of the Democratic Party votes and support. Jackson has 88.3% of the Republican support, but there's 33.7% out here that are independent. And so this is more than just a great space to be, because if either of these candidates want an independent vote, that means that they're going to actually have to either, if they're considered to be too much to the left or too much to the right, you know, they'll probably be forced to bring this in to some extent. But, you know, there's going to be a lot of changing on the campaign trail. And so also, as we we're not going to, I'm getting too money now. So hold on one second. Let me go back out. And let me just say, now this is something else here that we need to talk about. Let me tell you guys this point as to what this race means for Black America. Let's be clear about this and what is actually happening in Georgia in November of 2026. We're watching history attempt to happen in real time. If Keisha Lance Bottoms wins this race, she does not just become the governor of Georgia. She becomes the first Black woman ever elected as governor in the history of the United States of America. Not the first Black woman elected in the South, not the first Black woman elected in a purple state, the first ever anywhere. That matters beyond symbolism, that a Black woman governor of Georgia will control state emergency management, criminal justice reform, Medicaid expansion, education funding, and appointment of the state court judges. In a state where the U.S. Supreme Court has recently cleared the path for red states to eliminate majority Black voting districts. A decision that has energized the Democratic base in Georgia, the governor's power to shape policy and legal response to those rulings is enormous. And then there's the question of turnout. Georgia's Black community turned out in historic numbers in 2020 and 2021. They elected 2 Democratic U.S. senators, but the governor's mansion has always slipped away. The question for this November is whether the community will show up with the same energy for Keisha Lance Bottoms that it showed up for Raphael Warnock, John Ossoff. The polling suggests enthusiasm is high, but enthusiasm and votes are not the same thing. So if you start out one way and you change your mind, I hope whatever change your mind is the right thing. But that's a very interesting point to put out there because, again, these polls, they show a lot of things leading up to the actual election. But when it's time for that election, you know, people getting those little boosts, change their minds. They change their minds. This is also a race about economic power. Bottoms' platform speaks directly to Black Georgians expanding Medicaid, protecting reproductive rights, investing in Black-owned small businesses, and creating pathways to higher education. Jackson's platform of tax cuts and fiscal conservatism may appeal to some Black voters, particularly in Georgia's growing Black middle class, but the historic weight of this moment is on the side of one ballot. One. So this is why this moment is different. No Black woman has ever been elected governor in the 50 United States. Georgia has not elected a Democratic governor since 1998, which is 28 years. And the governor controls Medicaid, judicial appointments, criminal justice reform, and emergency management. Recent Supreme Court rulings on majority Black voting districts make gubernatorial power over state legal response critical. Bottoms captured 81% of Black voters. Turnout will be the decisive variable. Now, in just talking about that, we all know that when we talk about how this works and the importance of so many new things, you know, we still fail to we miss out on the wrong thing. So now let's talk about this money, because this is going to be major. And, you know, we started out the show and we told you, you know, what each of these candidates, what they raised and what they have as cash on hand right now at this moment, but also what they infused into their own campaigns out their pockets. And so as we see that and we go here, so what the numbers tell us is this, and these numbers tell us that it's a dead heat. The gender gap is real. Black voter unity is happening. Suburbs decide. Money matters. And youth versus age. Now, in each of those, if you wanted to break those down, you would say of these 6 categories, 4 of these would go into the category of Lance Bottoms. But even with that being said, that does not mean that means that Keisha Lance Bottoms is going to win this election. This election is going to be about you getting out there to the polls and you voting. You guys need to make sure that when there's early voting for a lot of people, because I know a lot of us have always got to deal with work, we want to make sure that we're doing what we have to do to get there to vote, and we do that on time. I always suggest early voting because, and whatever the election is, whenever there is an election, I'm voting early. There's no way I'm going to wait till the last moment where you've got all of these discrepancies and all these quirks of folk being upset and mad And what they're mad about, nobody knows. Nobody knows. But what I want you guys to know is that Georgia is very important, and Georgia is under the eyes of every other state in this country. Every other state. And there were some numbers that when I did the generic numbers, that is for when it came down to the men. The one thing that I still find scathing and not understanding is the thing that plagued Stacey Abrams was the black male vote. And it seems like with Jackson holding that 12-point lead with men, that the black men that vote on however they're voting, they choose to vote for Rick Jackson, or if they're going to vote for Rick Jackson, that's fine. But they are deciding that none of the other issues are important, apparently. I hope that they actually look at Rick Jackson's platform and think long and hard before they actually cast that vote. But again, that's for them to do. And that's for me to sit here like everybody else and just watch. But I want you guys to make sure that you find out where you need to vote. You find out the dates and the times for your polling place, and you make sure that you get there and you cast your ballot. I'm not telling you to vote for whoever you vote for is who you vote for, but just make sure you get there and you cast your ballot. It's your vote that counts. Me and anybody else can't tell you who to vote for. You make that decision, but you make sure you make that decision with your all of your moral compass, because it's going to be very, very important. Because this right here could decide the Georgia's governor's race could decide how things turn out for the future, not just of this state, but for most states, especially here in the Southeast region. Because there are an enormous amount of things that's happening with a lot of these states in the South, that are just unreprehensible. But I'm trying to understand one thing, and if somebody could tell me, why is it that there seems to be a disconnect when it comes to a lot of these black women that's running for office here in Georgia? I'm not understanding that. I don't think it's a disconnect, but apparently it is. But I hope that changes this time. And so as we go with that, I've went through all of the things that I wanted you guys to know. So I am going to do my closing monologue, and I'm going to close out the show. So as we wrap up tonight, I want to bring it back to something I said at the top of this show: 28 years. This is how long Georgia has been waiting for a Democratic governor. And in all those 28 years, we have never, not once, seen a black woman come this close to sitting in that office. What's happening in Georgia right now is bigger than a single campaign. It is the culmination of decades of organizing, registering, marching, and mobilizing. It is John Lewis's legacy made manifest in a ballot. It is Stacey Abrams' groundwork being tested in real time. It is the descendants of people who were told they could not vote, could not lead, could not govern, now standing at the threshold of the highest office in the state. And the margin, 1.5 points in the polls, less than 2 points, that means every single vote counts. This is not a cliche. That is a mathematical fact in the state of Georgia in 2026. Now, I want to be fair. Rick Jackson is not a cartoon villain. He is a man who came from nothing, built $1 billion company. That is remarkable American. That's a remarkable American story. And voters who care about tax policy government efficiency, and school choice are going to look at this platform seriously. But the question this show always asks is the question at the heart of American Black and White. What does this mean for Black America? And the answer in this race, in this state, in this moment is everything. Everything. Georgia is not just a battleground. It is a proven ground. It is where we find out whether the coalition that turned a state purple in 2020 can still go all the way to the governor's mansion in 26. Whether history gets made or deferred one more time, we will be watching, and we'll keep bringing you the truth in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King. This has been American Black and White, Season 4, Episode 128. Stay engaged and stay informed and stay in the fight. And one last thing, for those of you that are watching on any of our channels, especially our YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed and enabled all notifications, I ask if you would please go to our channels while you're there, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications button, so every time we go live, you get the live notification where you just click and join the show, and you also get the opportunity to go back and watch each and every recording that we've ever done, and you get to see and listen to all the great work for all the great people that have been here. I'm your host, Charles King. You guys have a great weekend and good night.